Sleigh bells ringing, diamonds blinging, carols singing, favorite season. Sleigh bells ringing, diamonds blinging, carols singing, favorite season. They said, say Nick, what you got up in that bag, yeah. I got racks in my sack or in my bag, yeah. They said, say Nick, what you got up in that bag, yeah. I got racks in my sack or in my bag, yeah. Frozen, neck is frozen, catch me rolling.
We would like to do something a little bit different. Let's pick like 5 topics that have been out throughout this past year in the NFL. And as we did last week, ranking with emojis, let's give it a little simpler ranking status. Let's give it a thumbs up or thumbs down comparative to how we think the NFL has handled those things. What do you think?
I think that's a great segment, man. Let's get right into it.
All right. So first up, this one is pretty easy. I'll give you a gimme. Refs, Nick. What do you think? Thumbs up, thumbs down, and then we'll explain.
I think we're both in agreement. This is thumbs down 100%, right?
Absolutely. So thumbs down on the refs. What is your thoughts on this?
So the thing with the refs, and there's always complaints about the refs every year. It just is. It's just the way sports is, just how it works. The NFL with the officiating this year has been so bad. The taunting penalties and the personal foul roughing the passers have been absolutely egregious. You know, there's the Cassius Marsh taunting penalty that cost the Bears a win. There seems to be one every week, right? You had Mike Pereira, who's a former VP of NFL officiating, former head honcho of NFL. He is a guy who is always sticking up for refs. He went on an interview and said, yeah, refs are afraid to officiate. It's really bad. He wishes it could be better. Literally everyone across the board has hated the refs this year. They've changed games completely. You know, there's always the funny meme. It seems every game there's a really bad roughing the passer. There's always a meme that goes around, you know, about, oh, we need to ban that player, the most brutal hit of all time and stuff like that. It has gotten bad. And the problem is that the worse it gets, I think the refs get more and more gun shy, which makes it even worse. It's just a feedback loop, and the NFL has lost control.
Absolutely. And, you know, there's been plenty of games we've talked about this week. Like, oh, that's the most brutal hit I've ever seen. I think there was like a Steelers Titans hit where the Titans player like trips over and like barely falls into Ben's leg, and all of a sudden he acts like his leg has snapped in half, and they call like roughing passer. It's gotten out of control, and it's been the last few years, but it really seems to have propelled itself further than it ever has before this year in particular. All right, Nick. Next up, let's take a look at the NFL's approach on social justice. What do you think about this?
So I'm going to go thumbs down real quick, and then do you agree or you disagree?
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, so the social justice thing, and here's the thing. Right now in the world and really in the country, right, on 99.999% of issues, we're split right down the middle. You got half the people disagree, you know, half the people think one way, the other half of people disagree and complete the exact same opposite. It's just the way the world is, just the way the country is right now. Well, the NFL has done something remarkable here. It took social justice and started trying to implement policies and things like that in a way that really irritated and annoyed, you know, half the country who felt that kind of stuff shouldn't be in sports. So it pissed off that half of the country. And then when it tried to implement those policies or say they were going to, they really didn't do anything with them, anything at all, really. So then they, in the process of doing that, they pissed off the other half of the country. So the NFL has done something remarkable here. It has managed to find a way to irritate both sides of the country equally at the exact same time.
Yeah, and like you said, some people believe it shouldn't be in sports, and be that as it may, other people wanted the NFL to take a stance on this and do something because a lot of players may be affected by some of the injustices that they're saying are out there. And what is the most that the NFL has done is put in racism in the end zone of the fields, put little slogans on the back of the helmets, maybe put a few Black Lives Matter signs in the stadium. They haven't put their money where their mouth is. Maybe they've donated to a couple charities. They haven't taken a stance. I think they've been lukewarm on this at best. Like you said, they piss off the people who don't want it to be in sports. Okay, but we're going to piss you off by putting it into the sports. But now that we put it in, we're not actually going to do anything about it. So I think it pisses everybody off tenfold because the guys who are like, okay, if you're going to put it in, at least do something about it. Like, give me a reason to be pissed off. Like, it's crazy how they can take something that's so simple and botch it so bad. All right, Nick. Moving on from that one, let's go to the NFLPA, the Players Association. What do you think there?
So I'm going to give the NFL a thumbs up.
I agree with you. Thumbs up.
And the reason for it is not because the NFL treats the NFLPA really, really well. It's that the NFL absolutely crushes the NFLPA. I always love the NFLPA when they come in with their lawyers and all this stuff for these collective bargaining agreement discussions. And they always come in and say, they leave the agreement and say, we got everything we wanted and, we're very happy with it. The NFLPA goes into these discussions with the NFL, which is literally ran by nothing but lawyers, funded by 32 billionaires. Yeah. The NFLPA loses that by a lot every single time. And the NFL they got to be laughing behind closed doors because they get almost everything they want every single time. They demolish the NFLPA, and at the same time, they somehow find a way to make the NFLPA think they got something. It's literally like a guy who's like going in to negotiate a raise, and he accepts a pay cut instead, and he walks out the door, like thanks his boss. Like, that's how bad it is, and the NFL just demolishes them all the time.
Yeah, and you got to feel bad for him for a sense. I always like to think, like this past year, or maybe it's 2 years ago, the NFLPA, the thing they wanted to hang their hat on is no more testing for marijuana. Well, okay, the NFL counters with, we'll do that, but we're going to add an extra game onto the season. And we're going to do stuff with player salaries and things like that. So it's like you said, we're not going to test for marijuana. And the marijuana test was a joke anyways, because the test was a certain date. And once you got tested, you didn't get tested at all for the rest of the year until the next year, unless you got put into the counseling program. But so it wasn't even like a thing anyways. All you had to do was get clean one time. Like, they all right, we're going to give up everything to get rid of marijuana testing. Like, why can't you, get benefits for older players or something like that? Do anything. But like you said, they just get bulldozed by the NFL, so.
It's funny. Can you imagine that negotiation? The NFL, who pays for the testing, right, goes in the negotiation and like, okay, we want more games, we want more revenue, we want the owners to make more money out of this. How the heck are we going to do this? And is there any way we can lower costs? There's no way we can get both. And the NFLPA is like, okay, we want you to stop paying for testing and we'll play another game.
It's like a gold mine.
Okay, signed. It's hilarious.
All right. Next up, this might be surprising to some people, but COVID. What else could we talk about this year? I promise we won't talk about COVID itself. Nick, what is your thoughts on the NFL's approach to COVID this year?
So this has only changed recently, but I'm going to switch to a thumbs up.
I agree. As of late, they've done a much better job, in my opinion.
Right. So, like you and I have been talking about, the fact that they decided, to say, look, we're no longer going to do all this daily testing. And if someone's close to you who tested positive, you have to get tested and all these protocols. They said, enough of that. If you've gotten the shots, and you're asymptomatic, you don't have to get tested ever, no matter what. Doesn't matter. And that just makes it so much better because that's the whole purpose, right? If you don't have the disease, right, if you don't have any of the symptoms or things like that, there's no reason to get tested anyway. So don't make it harder on teams to field games, right? There was a lot of games that got moved this past weekend just for that, right? I think the Browns had 20 guys out, and they were all asymptomatic and they're all vaccinated. And why would they move that game? These guys are fine. They just tested positive because the variant was just in their nose or something like that. It was a stupid policy. Glad they changed it and they moved on. They were smarter. They were flexible. Give the NFL a lot of credit here, too, for one other thing. Remember, before the season, they said, we are not going to move any games, no matter what. Not going to happen. Well, they finally got to the end of the season and we're like, well, we had a really dumb policy and we're not going to screw a bunch of teams just because we're going to have everyone get, a bunch of positives. Everyone's going to have starting quarterbacks and star players out and coaches out. Enough of that. We're changing our policy and we're going to move games this week just to clean it up a little bit. So I give the NFL a thumbs up for being flexible and finally getting with the program.
Yeah, way to pivot on something that you took a staunch stance on in the beginning. And it's like you kind of brought it up, and I'll touch on this just briefly. If you were to call the hospital, if you were to call your local testing center and be like, hey, I want to get a COVID test. I don't have any symptoms. They would tell you, no, don't get tested. If you have no symptoms, it's not worth getting tested. Just wait until you have symptoms, and then we can go get tested. And it's like you said, it seems like a waste of time if they're vaccinated, if they're asymptomatic. There's no point in testing those players. So moving on to our last, probably my favorite topic, the NFL and streaming services. Nick, what do you think about this? I think I know.
I'm going to go thumbs up here, a little tentative thumbs up, but I'm going to explain why in a second. What do you think?
I think, in theory, it is the best idea that they have possibly come up with.
Yeah, and I agree. That's exactly where I'm going with. And I think you hit it on one of our earlier shows. Why are NFL games not live streamed? Why are we always just a slave to local market games? And the NFL is we see these conversations with Amazon, right? With Amazon Prime and some of these other deals, these other streaming services. Amazon is bidding really, really hard for Thursday Night Football next year. And guess what Amazon's doing? They're bringing in the big guns. They're bidding for Al Michaels. They're bidding for Troy Aikman. They're building a team. And if Amazon can build a team, and if there's a company that has deep pockets, it's Amazon. I guarantee you their next thing is they're going to create a package, right? Like Sunday Ticket for streaming. And I think that's exactly what NFL fans want. That's exactly what NFL fans need. And I think that's where the NFL is going. I think the NFL is going to license those games to Amazon Prime the way they did with NFL Sunday Ticket and DirecTV. And I couldn't be happier if that happens.
And I think, what was Sunday Ticket? I think it's something like $300 a season or something like that.
Yeah, it was pretty high.
If you told me that all I had to do was have Amazon Prime, which is like $250 a year, and then pay $300 a season to watch every game whenever I wanted streaming, I would absolutely pay that. There's no question in my mind. I would throw my money at the TV to get something like that because of how bad it is now. The NFL is just missing on tons and tons of revenue. I don't pay for anything right now. I would pay for that in a heartbeat.
And there's such the NFL, because there's only the major networks really have the infrastructure to broadcast games, right? CBS, NBC, ESPN, ABC, and Fox. So, right, the NFL, while they make an ungodly amount of money in these TV deals, they really don't have any control of the distribution, right? The local networks, they're the ones, and these not local networks, but these big networks, they're the ones that film it. They come up with the how it's going to be viewed and displayed for everybody to see, with their pregame shows and their how they just go the telecast. I think if the NFL partners with like Amazon, a company like Amazon, they'll have a lot more creative control. And I think there's a lot the NFL could do with that. Can you imagine? I'm thinking imagining two games simultaneously on your screen, right, left and right,
That'd be crazy.
Like the old pictures with people watching 10 TVs at once. I think stuff like that's coming right around the corner. I really do. I think the NFL is being really forward thinking on this, and that's why I gave them the thumbs up.